Israel said the tunnels are used for weapons smuggling, and Tzipi Livni came to the U.S. in the midst of the attacks to get the U.S. to vow they would stop this weapons smuggling.
But oughtn't we just use that as a segue into understanding the extent of the United States weapon delivery to the Israeli government? I mean, the planes that were flying overhead were using aviation fuel given free of charge by the United States taxpayers. The drones that are flying overhead doing surveillance represent state-of-the-art modern technology. The amount of money the United States gives annually, $2.6 billion, to Israel. This is a delivery that doesn't even require any kind of smuggling, because the world has said yes. The United States and Israel can collaborate, and they can beat up on Palestinian people, pounding them into the ground as much as they want, and there will be complicity.
What about George Mitchell going to Israel now, going to the occupied West Bank? But at least at this point, they've not announced plans for him to go to Gaza.
He has such an opportunity to make tracks out of the comfort of offices and salons in Tel Aviv and go to Gaza. Ban Ki-moon did it. My hope is that he would go and stay for several days, that he would make a thorough tour of the Gaza Strip, and I hope that everybody in the United States who's tuned into his travel will encourage him to avail himself of what is a crucial opportunity to state his own desire to listen, as the president has instructed him to do. He should be listening to the mothers, to the children, to the doctors, to the people who are trying to now rebuild after a fierce and horrible assault.
Why did you leave Gaza?
You know, the electricity was sporadic. The internet connections were not so available. We felt we had a story to tell, and so we decided, it was a difficult decision to make. We decided, though, that it might be best to leave. But also the people giving us hospitality, I think, were a bit worried that they were becoming too high profile. I'll have to acknowledge that people are afraid of what the Hamas authorities might think of what they're doing, and housing two Westerners and shepherding them around the area was perhaps for the students beginning to become worrisome.
I wanted to ask what you think of your fellow Chicagoan who's just become president of the United States, Barack Obama, who says he will double the force, for example, in Afghanistan, though has vowed to draw down troops in Iraq.
Well, this is a grave disappointment. I think we can still hold out hope in the reports that he said once, maybe 4 years ago, that his leading lights were the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Mohandas Gandhi. But I think that the pressure that he has buckled under in terms of adhering to the demands of people who are weapon makers and war makers is a pressure that won't bring security to his fellow citizens in the United States or to the world. I hope he'll step away from U.S. exceptionalism and see the United States as part of the family of nations, not as a nation that has an indispensable role in the world.
I'll never forget, not that I was there in Iraq when you were right before the invasion, but the scene described, I think we talked to you around then, of you holding a protest outside the U.S. Embassy right before the attack, and the journalists surrounding you, almost attacking you for what you were doing. Can you explain that scene? They were calling you a collaborator with Saddam Hussein for protesting the imminent attack.
I have a pretty vivid memory of that day as well. We were in front of the United Nations compound, and we had a big sign that said, "No blank check for war." And Jeremy and others, Jeremy Scahill, had gone over to the prison just prior to that, where people had been released by Saddam Hussein. And I remember John Burns in particular. He was so angry.
John Burns of the New York Times.
Yeah, with my belief that, in fact, you know, we had a prison industrial complex in the United States that perhaps should bear scrutiny and attention, and that maybe what Saddam had done might be something that the United States could consider as well. But I have to say that after the war, after John Burns was kind of stuck in the Palestine Hotel in a staircase, at some point, at some risk to his own life, he pulled me over while he was with another group of reporters, and he said, "This is the person to go to if you want to hear the humanitarian story in Iraq." So I should probably add that part too.
Were you saying he was, in a sense, apologizing to you?
Oh, that might be a stretch, but at any rate, it didn't seem to be a relationship fraught by
conflict. And what was the
conflict.
anger that was being expressed to you right before the invasion? I mean, these reporters were supposed to be covering your point of view, but they were arguing with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the reporters were very, very angry at Saddam Hussein's regime, in part because they would be bounced out every 10 days and have to pay enormous amounts of money, which all went in order to come back into the country every 10 days. And that went to the Ministry of Tourism. Well, believe me, there was no tourism in Baghdad before the war. So in a sense, it went right into the pockets of the Mukhabarat, the Secret Service agency that was hounding them and tracking their every step. They were very, very angry, and I think they had a right to be. Saddam Hussein's regime was ruthless and horrible, but it wasn't fair to say that we were the silent servants of Saddam Hussein. We were trying to say that you don't punish children. Children couldn't be held accountable for that government. And John Burns deemed the demonstration we had as a demonstration that Saddam Hussein loved to see, but we saw the headline that he used as a headline that George Bush loved to see. And these kinds of it was a headline exactly that, saying that it was a demonstration Saddam loved to see.
Finally, with Barack Obama now the President of the United States, are you strategizing differently? You are one of the most well-known international peace activists.
I think if we take a wait-and-see attitude, that could quickly morph into inertia. And so I think it's just as imperative and as much of a responsibility for adults in the United States to keep trying to identify the grave dangers that exist as we continue to pour resources into military projects. And I think we should continue to say, abandon these military projects. They don't bring us security. And at a time when there are so many environmental concerns, when the financial collapses of so many industries are affecting people, we should be taking that money that we've given to the Defense Department and putting it into things that really ensure security, and then continuing to demand that President Obama pay attention to these kinds of vital concerns. We camped outside his home for 19 days in Arctic temperatures in Chicago. I left in the middle to go to Gaza, what we called Camp Hope. And we did want to be respectful of the neighbors of the Obama family, of all the many people who are feeling great congratulatory happiness. But I think that we have to recognize that President Obama has now become the chief arms exporter in the world. He's in charge of the most massive killing machine in the world. And it's our responsibility to continue to hold forth those visions of another way without extending the arm of imperial menace and might all over the world. Instead, to be extending a hand of friendship and to share resources as best we can.
Kathy Kelly, I want to thank you for being with us. Kathy Kelly is Executive Director of Voices for Creative Nonviolence, a veteran peace activist, founder of Voices in the Wilderness. She's just returned from Gaza. She lives in Chicago when she's ever home. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. We'll be back in a minute.
Please tell me the reason behind the colors that you fly. Please tell me the reason you want us to unify. You say you're sorry, said there is no other choice. But how can you feel sorry when you kill people with no voice?